Anika Sharma, the devoted wife and mother, and Daniel Miller, the charming young neighbor, seemed like two people whose paths should never have crossed. Yet their secret connection in a quiet Los Angeles suburb would ignite a chain of events that ended not in love, but in murder. In the calm suburbs of Los Angeles, the Sharma household stood as a symbol of stability and comfort. Anika Sharma, at 38, carried herself with quiet grace. Neighbors often admired her warmth during community gatherings and her dedication to her two children. Her husband, Raj, was a hard-working IT professional, a man respected for his discipline and reliability. Together, they looked like a couple who had successfully built the American dream. On the outside, their lives moved smoothly. Morning routines, school drop-offs, work schedules, and family dinners that looked picture-perfect to anyone passing by. But beneath the polished image, Anika lived with an emptiness she rarely admitted to herself. Days stretched into one another, blending into a cycle of household chores, errands, and polite conversations with other mothers at the park. Her world revolved around her children, yet she felt invisible as a woman. Raj, often preoccupied with work and financial responsibilities, no longer noticed the small details that once mattered: the way she dressed, the meals she carefully prepared, or the silence in her voice. Anika kept her restlessness hidden. She smiled through temple visits, posed happily in family photographs, and greeted neighbors with warmth. Still, when she was alone, a sense of longing grew heavier. She missed the thrill of being seen, the spark of excitement she once knew in her youth. As the years passed, her reflection in the mirror reminded her of the life she was living for others, not herself. It was this quiet yearning, this unspoken desire for something beyond duty, that made her vulnerable. She never imagined that her need for change would take her down a path so dark and irreversible. Yet fate was already setting the stage for her undoing. It was during one of those quiet evenings in early summer when Anika first noticed the new neighbor. The house next door had been vacant for months, and she had grown used to the silence. Then came Daniel, a young man barely in his 20s, moving in with little more than a few boxes and a confident stride. He was strikingly different from the families who usually settled in the area. His energy was vibrant, his smile disarming, and his presence impossible to ignore. From her kitchen window, Anika often caught glimpses of him unloading groceries, jogging in the mornings, or sitting on his porch with headphones on. There was something magnetic about the way he carried himself, carefree and untethered. At first, their encounters were nothing more than casual nods. A polite hello at the mailbox, a brief smile while taking out the trash. But soon those fleeting moments began to linger. His eyes seemed to hold hers a second too long. His tone carried a warmth that felt more personal than neighborly. Anika felt a rush she had almost forgotten existed, a fluttering sensation that unsettled her yet drew her closer. She told herself it was harmless, just an innocent attraction, something she could tuck away without consequence. Yet, the thought of him began to creep into her days. She found herself stepping outside more often, adjusting her schedule to cross paths. Every glance, every accidental brush of hands while exchanging a borrowed tool, felt like a secret charged with meaning. It was dangerous, and somewhere deep down, she knew it. Still, the dullness of her routine made the temptation impossible to resist. Without realizing it, Anika had already crossed a line, not in action, but in desire. A seed had been planted, and it was only a matter of time before it grew into something she could no longer control. The stolen moments between Anika and Daniel grew bolder with each passing week. What had begun as lingering glances and casual greetings evolved into carefully orchestrated meetings. When Raj left for work and the children were at school, Daniel would appear at Anika's door, and together they would slip into a world hidden from the rest of the neighborhood. In those hours, she felt alive in a way she had not in years, intoxicated by the secrecy and the thrill of being wanted so completely. For Daniel, the affair was more than a distraction. It was an obsession that consumed his thoughts. The pair believed they were careful, but secrets have a way of revealing themselves. Neighbors began to whisper after noticing Daniel's car parked outside the Sharma house at odd times. Some spotted Anika leaving his place with hurried steps, her hair tousled as though she had been somewhere she shouldn't. Rumors drifted through the community, and though no one dared confront her, The shift in glances and half-smiles did not go unnoticed. Inside her own home, Raj began sensing a change he could not explain. Anika grew distant, distracted during conversations, her phone always nearby. Once attentive and engaged, she now seemed preoccupied, lost in thoughts she would not share. Small details caught his attention. The perfume she wore on days she never left the house, the nervous energy in her movements when he returned early. For Anika, the lies became heavier with time. The thrill of her secret meetings was tinged with fear, yet she could not pull away. Each visit to Daniel's house was both an escape and a risk. She convinced herself no one truly suspected, but the truth was already unraveling. The perfect image of her family life was starting to fracture, and the cracks were only getting wider. What began as a thrilling escape soon took on a darker edge. At first, Daniel's intensity was flattering to Anika. He texted her constantly, showered her with attention, and spoke about her as though she were the center of his world. But as the months passed, the excitement that once energized her began to feel suffocating. Daniel no longer seemed content with stolen afternoons or whispered moments. He pressed for permanence, asking her to leave Raj and promising her a life filled with freedom and passion. Anika hesitated, torn between the fantasy he painted and the reality she lived. She knew the cost of walking away, the shame from her family back in India, the whispers in her community, the fear of losing her children. Divorce, in her world, was not just a decision, it was a scandal. Yet Daniel could not understand the weight of these consequences. His impatience grew sharper with every refusal, his once playful remarks turning into ultimatums. The tension seeped into every meeting. Their conversations became strained, their encounters laced with arguments. Anika began to dread the intensity in his eyes, the way his emotions swung from affection to anger in a matter of minutes. She tried to create distance, but Daniel would not allow it. He began appearing uninvited, watching her from his window, sending messages late into the night that carried a mix of desperation and threat. What had started as an intoxicating escape now resembled a cage. Anika felt trapped between two lives, one bound by duty, the other by obsession. Her longing for freedom had led her into a situation far more dangerous than the monotony she had once resented. What she could not see then was how quickly Daniel's passion was curdling into something far more sinister. The night of the tragedy began like so many others, quiet, ordinary, unremarkable. Raj had returned home late from work, exhausted and distracted, barely noticing the tension in Anika's eyes. The children were asleep, the house filled with its usual stillness. But inside Anika, a storm was raging. After yet another heated exchange with her husband, she slipped out of the house and walked next door, drawn by the pull she could never fully resist. She told herself it was just to clear her mind, to find comfort in the arms that had once felt like an escape. Inside Daniel's home, the atmosphere was charged from the start. Their reunion did not bring peace, but confrontation. Daniel pressed her again for answers, for commitments she was unwilling to make. He demanded a decision, certain she could not continue living two lives. Anika, weary and anxious, resisted him more firmly than before. Words escalated into shouting, and the distance between them collapsed under the weight of anger. In that suffocating moment, reason dissolved. Daniel's frustration boiled over, and he lashed out with a force he had never shown her before. Grabbing a heavy object from the table, he struck her in a sudden burst of rage. The blow was fatal, the silence that followed more chilling than the argument itself. In an instant, the woman who had brought color to his life lay lifeless at his feet. Shock consumed him, but fear quickly followed. Instead of seeking help, Daniel's mind turned to concealment. He wrapped her body clumsily, his hands trembling, and carried her to her car. Driving into the night, he found a remote canyon on the city's outskirts, a place where he believed no one would find her. As dawn approached, the weight of his crime hung heavy, though he tried desperately to bury it, alongside the woman he once claimed to love. When Anika did not return home that night, Raj assumed she had gone to visit a friend or simply needed space after their argument. But as the hours stretched into the early morning, worry began to creep in. He called her phone repeatedly, only to hear it go unanswered. By the next day, panic replaced irritation. Raj contacted neighbors, checked with friends, and finally reported her missing to the police. The news spread quickly through the quiet community, where whispers of speculation began to circle. Investigators wasted no time piecing together her final movements. Neighbors mentioned seeing Anika's car parked near Daniel's house late that evening, and some had noted how frequently the young man visited her home when Raj was away. Suspicion formed almost immediately. Daniel told officers that he had seen Anika briefly, but insisted she had left soon afterward. His calm demeanor seemed convincing at first, but cracks in his story quickly appeared. Surveillance footage from a nearby street camera revealed her car pulling into his driveway that night and not leaving until hours later. More damning were the inconsistencies in Daniel's timeline. He struggled to explain where he had been during critical hours, and his nervous gestures betrayed the fear he tried to hide. Raj, devastated, cooperated fully with the investigation, though the growing evidence was almost unbearable for him to process. The picture of a devoted wife vanishing without trace did not match the portrait of secrecy that police were uncovering. As days passed with no sign of Anika, the sense of dread grew heavier. What had begun as a missing persons case was slowly transforming into something darker, and all signs pointed to the young neighbor whose charm had once seemed so harmless. The facade of innocence around Daniel was crumbling fast. A week after Anika's disappearance, the search came to a devastating end. Hikers exploring a remote canyon stumbled upon a body wrapped in cloth, hidden among rocks. Authorities confirmed what Raj had feared most. Anika had been murdered. The discovery sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. The woman who had once symbolized warmth and family was now the subject of a tragedy too grim to comprehend. News outlets swarmed the community, painting a picture of betrayal and violence that few could have imagined behind the closed doors of suburban life. Forensic experts worked swiftly. Fibers from Daniel's home matched those found with Anika's remains. The surveillance footage placed her at his property the night she vanished, and traces of her blood were discovered in his living room, hastily cleaned but impossible to erase completely. The evidence left no room for doubt. Daniel was arrested, his face no longer the charming masked neighbors had known, but the haunted stare of a man caught in his own destruction. In court, the truth spilled out in painful detail. Prosecutors described how an affair born of passion spiraled into control, obsession, and ultimately, murder. Daniel confessed, admitting he had lost control during an argument, claiming it was never his intention to kill her. But his words did little to soften the horror of his actions. The jury saw through the excuses, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Raj sat quietly through the proceedings, his grief heavy but silent. He returned home to his children, now left to rebuild their lives without the mother who had once held them together. The community, shaken to its core, was left with a sobering reminder. Behind even the most ordinary appearances can lie secrets capable of unraveling everything, turning passion into tragedy and love into ruin.